Gul Bibi, lecturer commerce, Government College for Women, Khairpur. Today we will learn business communication chapter 1. The objectives of today's lecture are these. We will cover importance and benefits of effective business communication, ancient heritage for communication principles, lifeblood of every organization, benefits of effective communication in your career, challenges of communication and global market. Let's move. First of all, we should know what is communication. Now, communication is a two-way process, sending and receiving messages, whether you exchange an email, giving a formal presentation, or chatting with your co-workers, with your friends, with your colleagues, with your peers. That is your communication. And why we have a need of effective communication? We can communicate, but why we have a need of effective? We need effective communication to get the desired results. And when we want the other party should respond it to the way that we want. Now, effective communication in business. Effective communication in journal we learn, but why effective communication is necessary in businesses? First of all, the definition of business is the activity of buying, selling, or supplying goods or services for money legally. Now, the effective communication helps in business to manage your workflows, improve business relationships, enhances your professional image in the market, provides variety of other important benefits. If you have effective communication processes in your businesses. Effective communication is at the center of virtually every aspect of business because it connects the company with all stakeholders: customers, employers, employees, shareholders, suppliers, the community, and the nation. When because when you are running a business, you have to make relationships with your customers, employees, shareholders. You have to communicate with them. With customers, you have to communicate. If you are selling any product, then you have to communicate about the product, what features it has, and the employees who are working in your company, the shareholders, the suppliers whom you are taking the material, and the community as a whole, and the nation. So, it is necessary for the organizations to have effective communication systems in their organizations. Now, the importance and benefits of effective communication. If you can communicate effectively in writing and speaking, you have a highly valued skill in any era, in any time, in any place. If you have ability to communicate well in speaking and writing, you have you are valued. In any surveys, in many researches have been conducted by business executives, and it has been proved that if you have good communication skills both in writing and speaking, then you will be successful. You will get more earlier promotions in your career. Now, communication is not only limited to your businesses, but it is necessary across all the areas of business, including management, technical, clerical, social positions. Communication has been crucial part of businesses. The ability to communicate well has always provided advantage to those with ability. Obviously, if you can communicate effectively, then you get promoted earlier. If your writing skills are good, then you get good marks in early stages of your life, like in your schools, and you have good presentation skills, and you will be also valued in your schools, colleges, universities. And likewise, when you get the job, if you have both communication skills are good, you will be successful and you will be and grow more further as compared to those whose communication skills are weaker. Next, now the communication is not has starting from today's technological era or world. It has been important since ancient times, when people heavily relied on oral communication. There were no any sense of written communication. They were heavily relied on your oral communication. Is, when as the time passes, when people realize that to maintain the permanent record you have to write, then when written communication became important, then many communication skills like your grammar books appeared in the market. Many authors started to write the principles of communication on the how to communicate effectively and so on. Next, the lifeblood of every organizations. Now, organizations cannot function without open and effective communication. Why? Because in any organization, there are a group of people exist, like your colleagues, your employees, your customers, your shareholders. Many people, you have to communicate with them in in business, religious, welfare community. Wherever you live, you work, you have to communicate. In organizations, if your communication is weak, then the organization cannot survive. So, it is required for managers, for executive directors, for CEOs to communicate effectively with their employees, with their subordinate, and to for the flow of information to get the ideas to work smoothly. Communication is very much necessary. Next, now the some definition and analysis. As I told earlier, communication is a two-way process of transmitting and receiving verbal and non-verbal messages. Verbal and non-verbal. Now, what is verbal communication? Verbal communication includes, there are two types of communication, verbal and non-verbal. Your verbal communication includes oral as well as written. The books we read, what we listen, what we speak, these all things comes under the category of verbal communication. Now, what is non-verbal communication? Non-verbal communication is your body language, your expressions, your expressive behaviors. This is called your non-verbal behavior, non-verbal communication. Clear? Next, the verbal communication includes listening, speaking, reading, writing, discussions, experiments, presentations, group discussions. These all includes comes under the umbrella of verbal communication. Whether the books you read, whether you speak, whether you listen, whether you read, these all comes under the umbrella of verbal communication. Next, non-verbal communication. As I told earlier, non-verbal is your body language, your gestures, your postures, your eye contact, your voice. All things comes under the non-verbal communication, where your body communicate with other person. Let's read the definition as the process of using wordless meaning to generate meaning. Means if someone is happy, we will look at him, his expressions, his body language tells us that this person is happy, or this person is sad, or this person is angry. Through his body language, we will get to know the meaning of communication, what the other person is communicating through his body language. Likewise, eye contact. When we eye contact, then we understand the other person is getting our point or not. The use of non-verbal communication can create a whole new meaning to a message. How? Like non-verbal communication, every person has its own understanding of messages. Like Sherlock Holmes said there, you see but you do not observe. We see but we do not observe. what the body language of other person is saying to us, communicating. We will generate meaning according to our experience, our our own opinions, attitudes, our own feelings. We will generate meaning according to our own understanding. So it will create, it is not as vivid and clear as your verbal communication, but it is also a form of communication. Now there is a non-verbal and verbal communication discussion, whether verbal communication is the exchange of information by words, whether is non-verbal communication is the exchange of information by wordless cues, like I said earlier, the happiness, sadness, angriness, body language, eye contact, gestures, postures, these all influence in your non-verbal communication and it communicates with you. Verbal communication has less chance of confusion and misunderstanding the message because it is vivid and clear, while non-verbal communication has more chances of confusion and misunderstanding the message. Verbal communication leads to prompt interchange of information. You will get rapid response in your verbal communication, while non-verbal communication take more time. Verbal communication does not essentially require the presence of both the parties at the same time. For example, an author writes a book. We will read the book, but author is not present in front of us. While in non-verbal communication requires the presence of both the parties at the same place, then you will be able to understand the body language. Next, now the components of communication. When you are sending any message to any other person, what process does it include? There is context, sender encoder, message, medium, receiver, decoder, feedback. As you can see the basic model of communication, the communication cycle. A sender is also called as encoder, who sends a message through communication channel. That is called your medium, whether face to face, video, telephone, speeches, voicemails, then email, letters, media. Sender sends the message through any communication channel to a receiver, to a decoder who decodes the message, who understands the message, who gets the message. Then the cycle runs when decoder receiver receives the message, then it gives feedback to the sender whether it gets your message or not. We will read in deep. Next, the context. Context. Every communication begins with a context. Now, context is a broader term. Context is a broad field that includes your country, your culture, organization, internal and external stimuli. Context, under what circumstances it made you to send a message. What triggers you to write a message, to send a message, to deliver a speech, to call a person. What is your context? That context decides whether you want to send a message or not. Now there is external stimulus which can motivate individuals to respond in oral or written form, like in interaction sessions. Student and teacher is there. Student is asking questions in response. Student is responding or asking questions for further clarification. In internal stimuli like opinion, attitude, likes, dislikes, emotions, experience, confidence which can influence communication. For example, when you are listening any speech or any conversation between two persons or a person is conversating with you, then it's your own opinion whether you are remaining silent or you are also giving response. It depends on you, your attitude, your likes, dislikes, emotions, experience. Now, the communication is affected by the context in which it takes place. Obviously, whether it's external or internal or your cultural, this context may be physical, social, chronological, or cultural. Every communication proceeds with context. First part and components of communication, that is sender or encoder. Simply the sender, a person who sends a message is called a sender or encoder, whether the message is written form or in oral form. Message. Now, when sender decides to send a message, it must be in his mind through his context, which triggers him to write a message. Message is already in a sender's mind. Message is a key idea that the sender wants to communicate. It is a sign that elicits the response of recipient. Communication process begins with deciding about the message to be communicated. It means message is decided in the mind in the initial stage of cross communication process. It must be ensured that the main objective of the message is clear. Message should be clear and vivid. Next, the medium. Through which medium you want to send a particular message which you have decided in your mind. Whether you are sending through email, through call, through conversation, through speech, through letter, through text message. Medium is a means used to exchange, transfer the message. The sender must choose an appropriate medium for transmitting the message, else the message might not be conveyed to the desired recipient. Medium is necessary. Which medium a sender is deciding to send a particular message. Now the receiver, whom the message is to be delivered. Recipient decoder is a person for whom the message is intended, aimed, targeted. For example, a company wants to sell its product. Then the company wants to advertise it through media channels, through newspaper, through emails, through sales promotions. To its targeted receiver are the customers who will buy its product. The degree to which the decoder understands the message is dependent upon various factors, such as knowledge of recipient, the responsiveness to the message, and the reliance of encoder on the decoder. Now the receiver will understand the message according to his previous experience, its knowledge. For example, if any foreign product which is unknown to our community, our culture, any product if you are selling in your rural areas, any elite product, they will not understand or they will not how to use it, how to what is this, what's its benefits, they will not purchase because in that those targeted customers are not targeted. A sender should send a message to a receiver. First of all, he should know whether the receiver should understand my message or not. If any person is delivering in any unknown, any new language, like if someone is delivering lecture in French to Pakistani community, then how Pakistani will understand the message? They don't know even the language. So the receiver decodes the message according to his knowledge, his experience, his. Now the feedback. When a message is delivered to a receiver, what feedback it gives? Feedback is the main component of the communication process as it permits the sender to analyze the efficacy of message, whether the message is absorbed, delivered, understood or not. It helps the sender in confirming the correct interpretation of the message by the decoder. Feedback may be verbal, through words, or non-verbal in form of smiles, sighs, affirmation, etc. It may take written form also in form of memos, reports, etc. etc. So feedback, a sender will know whether my message is delivered and understood properly or not. That is your feedback. Now the diagram of components of message, components of communication. First of all, there is a sender which sends a message, whether oral or written, through medium, printed media, electronic media, media inside the organization and outside the organization. Any mode of sending a message to a receiver who receives a message. Then receiver gives feedback in oral, written, action, silence, positive or negative. Then the feedback is gone again to the sender, and according to context, sender is designing a message. Then the cycle goes on and on. That is all about today's lecture. Inshallah, we will continue further in next lecture. Thank you very much.